I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
Level with us. Welcome to our show, where we have a cozy book club-esque discussion every week with our listeners. This week, we'll be discussing Metroid Dread, which was just released on the Nintendo Switch a few days ago. For today, we'll be talking about our first impressions of the game, but there'll be some minor spoilers for the first couple hours until you reach about the third area of the map, so keep that in mind going forward. Next week, we'll do a full-on spoiler discussion about the game, so look forward to it. So to kick things off, Marcus, what's happening?
Metroid is going back to its roots. What we have here is a 2D adventure where Samus finds herself trapped on the planet ZDR, which is crawling with dreadful rogue robots called Emmys, which are basically stealth segments. And then, of course, we have our good mix of other monsters and puzzles and locks and keys, putting the Metroid in Metroidvania.
Nice. So I think before we get into the game, we should talk about what backgrounds we're coming from.
Yes.
So Marcus, what's your history with the franchise?
I don't have one, basically. I haven't played any of the 2D Metroid games. I guess the only Metroid game I've played is Metroid Pinball. Like, legitimately, that's it.
Hey, that's a really good entry in the series, I gotta say.
It was a lot of fun.
It's a Game of the Year contender for me this year. Did you know anything about the story going into this?
You know, I'm familiar with the franchise. You know, as a person who follows Nintendo generally, I know some of the... Yeah, I know the hallmarks of Metroid for sure. But how about you? You have a little bit more of an experience with this franchise, right?
Yeah, well, I was basically in the same boat as you until Dread was announced, and so I anxiously scrambled to try and get a copy of each game in the franchise and play through all of them, and I did. It was really fun playing through them. I actually didn't really like Metroidvanias until now. It's just like Hollow Knight, like it's really cool, but it's just not my forte. I get lost so easy and I just get frustrated. But I wanted to give the genre a try, and my coworker was like, oh, we'll start with something like Ori. Like Ori is really easy to get into. So I played Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and it was amazing, and I loved it. And then from there, I tried each game in the Metroid series. I played them completely out of order, though. I started with Fusion, and then Samus Returns, and then Zero Mission, and then AM2R, which is a fan game that a lot of people consider one of the best Metroid games made. So that was really interesting, and that was really good. And then I ended with Super Metroid. And I really like the series. I can now call myself a Metroid fan. I love the progression. I love the feeling of getting a new power-up and the map opening up. It's really rewarding. I still get lost a lot. Super Metroid in particular was really hard. It's like people's favorite. It was my least favorite just because I had to consult a walkthrough a couple times. But it was still really good. And each game I played just progressively made me more excited to play Dread.
So now that you have Dread, now that you have played Dread with all of this building excitement, was it a yeah or a meh? How was it?
It's a yeah. It's great. I think it'll be good that you're coming from not really playing any of the games, and I'm coming from just played through all of them, because I think it'll be good to have both perspectives. So,
sure, yeah.
Do you like this game? Because I feel like this game does kind of rely a little bit on knowing how the series works, jumping into it, like understanding how progressing through the map works.
Sure.
Yeah, how user-friendly has it been? I'm really curious.
You know, so I did play Hollow Knight earlier this year, so I have been introduced to kind of the Metroidvania tropes and such. I like that this one has map icons that show you the locks, and you can actually click one and it'll show you everywhere that lock is on the map. So that's kind of a cool quality of life thing if you're ever stuck and you need to figure out where your next critical path is.
Right, like a very particular type of door that you can now unlock.
That you can open now.
Right.
That being said, like my first hour or two of playing it, I was exploring it. It was great. Then I was convinced I was soft locked. I thought that I was in an area where I could not progress because I didn't get what I needed to do to escape the area. Obviously, I wasn't. I eventually figured it out, but so there were a few times I got pretty stuck.
Was it like some blocks that are invisible that you were supposed to shoot?
Yes.
In one of the rooms?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because that is a Metroid thing for sure. Like,
oh, yeah?
Not knowing where to go, and then it's just a room you passed over that you were supposed to shoot everything in the room kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I've seen less of in this game. This game, in my opinion, coming from where I'm at, I've gotten way less. It could be just because I played the other ones, but I don't know. I didn't get lost as often so far. In fact, I think so far the game has been pretty, I don't want to say
almost
linear.
linear. It feels slightly linear.
Well, yeah, it really wants you to progress to each area in a certain way so far, because it will, like, you'll crawl through a space and you can't go back until you get like the morph ball, and it's a while before you get it. So basically the game is kind of pushing you along, saying you can come back here once you get a power up, but for now we're going to just let you keep going down this course. But I think where I'm at right now currently, which is unlocking the third area, I'm starting to see it open up more, where I have the freedom to go back to old areas and look for power-ups.
I think there's a bit of an illusion of openness in that, like, you're wrapping back around yourself a few times throughout each of these areas, but I don't think there are multiple orders in which you can get the items within the game. I'll be interested to see, like, later on if speedrunners or people figure it out, but
I bet there will be. I bet there will be ways to sequence break, because the developers seem very aware that people like doing that. But yeah, for a first run, it's definitely not as open as something like Hollow Knight, which kind of just throws everything at you at once, and you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I personally don't mind that. I actually kind of like when a game guides me, because feeling lost, I know some people enjoy that feeling. I don't. I like knowing where I want to go, but I also like the freedom of being able to go off the path a bit and, look for extra power-ups and stuff like that. So, that being said, what about the new addition to the franchise, which is these kind of stealth segments with the Emmy robots? What did you think of those?
They're pretty scary, which is what they're going for. I'm not a huge stealth person, but I do like watching the robot climb at, like, breakneck speeds towards you over ceilings through little crevices. That felt really, really distinct. Like, they kind of nailed what they were going for. So I thought it was pretty cool, and I think it's cool that it kind of sanctions off these areas for it, so you know when you're entering and exiting it. And then when you, like, leave that area, you can kind of, take your time or go really fast or whatever, but when you're in that area, you have to, like, be on edge. And I think that's a fun kind of shaking up of the vibe of different areas.
Yeah, I found those parts actually really hard. And in fact, I feel bad for our YouTube viewers of the show, because the footage I recorded for this episode of our podcast is mostly just me dying to an Emmy over and over. But I eventually did triumph. I also really like the when you finally get to defeat the robot. I love how the camera shifts to over the shoulder and you watch it come towards you, so there's a lot of tension. That was pretty cool.
That is cool. I also conceptually like how when you get trapped by a robot, you have, like, a one chance opportunity to get out of it. I've only done it, like, 2 times because it's very difficult. It even says in game, like, it is extremely hard to time it right, but you can basically parry the robot and escape, which is nice because it means whenever you get captured, you don't just, like, go, you're, like, still in the moment, because you're like, maybe I can escape, even if you usually don't.
Well, and it feels really good if you can pull it off. I mean, like you said, it's a very desperate last resort, and I've only done it twice as well, despite dying tons of times. But it feels really good because then you can slide underneath it and run away, or you feel like you have another chance.
Yeah. On a related note, I'm curious what you think, coming from playing a bunch of Metroid games recently, to the difficulty of this. Is this a little bit easier than the previous games, or is it still pretty tough?
Yeah, I have died a few times in this game, both to the Emmys and to some of the bosses. Yeah, overall I'm happy with the difficulty so far. I heard that it does spike a bit later on, but we'll just have to see.
Okay, hey, have you faced the boss, Kraid?
Yeah,
Here's the thing, I might just not be good at video games. Maybe I'm just real bad. But I faced that boss over 30 times.
Oh
I
my
tried
gosh.
over 30 times to beat that boss. So much so that at a certain point I was like, maybe this is an optional boss. And I went back to both of the other areas and scoured and looked for anything else to do. there wasn't. So I had to go back, and then I brute forced my way through another like 5 or 6 times and eventually finally beat Kraid. So
what was it about that boss that was difficult for you?
I don't know, man. It was just hard. It was just, I think I wasn't really like figuring out how to respond to certain patterns.
Oh, my condolences.
Yeah, I was just hoping against hope that it was an optional boss. I was just like, I can go back later when I'm stronger, right? No, I couldn't.
You know what? Since we're talking about things that were a little difficult or maybe we didn't like, let's go ahead and get into quick jabs.
Jab, 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 jab. 1, 2, and jab, jab.
We want to try something a little different this week and do quick jabs before star pieces so that we can end on a more positive note. So my quick jab is actually the map. I really like it. I like how much freedom it gives you to zoom in, but a lot of the icons are just way too similar. Like they use a diamond shape for like entrances, exits, save points, bosses, refresh stations. I just think I think they could have changed the shape a bit. It would have just made it a little easier to read. Also, when you get a power up, it like fades the icon a little bit, but you can barely tell. Like, I had to hover over a lot of icons to be like, wait, did I acquire that one? Oh, I did. So I just kind of wish they had made a few tweaks. Otherwise, I really like the map, but yeah. What was your quick jab?
Well, it's sort of a quick jab, then anti-jab, then still a quick jab, because at first, my quick jab was, I wanted the areas to be distinct, like to look more distinct so I could kind of instantly know which territory am I in right now. And then I realized they were. It just wasn't immediately apparent to me. So I guess I wish it was a little more distinct. For example, there are lava areas in like all 3 of the places that I've been so far.
Yeah.
So, you know, I kind of wish that the thematic through lines of each area were a little bit tighter. I don't even know why. I just feel like maybe that's a Hollow Knight theme, because like you can tell when you're in Green Path because it's green, and you can tell when you're, you know, in different areas because they have a very much their own identity. A few rooms that you'll kind of wander into, I wouldn't be able to tell you which area I'm actually in because it looks sci-fi generic.
I think that's fair. It does get more
distinct over time.
Yeah, I will say later areas definitely the theme seems a little stronger. But for what's here, I think that's totally valid. It's I kind of forget sometimes which one I'm in, and also all the Emmy areas look pretty similar too. So that doesn't really help, huh?
Yeah.
And we actually have a quick jab from one of our listeners. This is from Gamer Hushu, who said, "No right stick aiming? The right stick is used as a button and not a stick. This could have been a chance to introduce a twin stick aiming mechanic to match the extra agility." And at first, when I read this, I was like, well, it doesn't really need it, but then I realized, oh, you don't really use the right stick at all. And also, it'd be nice to aim backward as you're running forward. So that I think that could work pretty well, but yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it looks like they decided to have it be where you hold down a button and that stops you in place, and then you can like free aim without running in the same direction you're tilting.
Right. And you can free aim a little bit when you're moving with the stick, but
it's definitely a pet peeve of mine anytime a game makes the click of the right stick a button. I can't remember what other game it was, but it also did that where it was like clicking, but you didn't use the stick for anything, and I was like, you just wanted an extra button, but this is not a button.
Sure.
Anyway.
Thank you for submitting that quick jab, Gamer Hushu. We appreciate it.
Well, with the jabs out of the way, why don't we do our star pieces?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Whereas quick jabs are little things we found annoying or we want to complain about, star pieces is the little details of things we really enjoyed or were excited to find in our playthrough. So Marcus, what was your star piece?
So we were talking kind of about these action command cutscenes or QuickTime, whatever, which I could give or take. But one thing I do love is Samus is dope and looks like a boss in a lot of these cutscenes. I really enjoy it. I think that the character animation really sells, like her stoic bad A-ness. Just like occasionally, you know, it'll in the final moments of some boss, she'll just like stand there and like tilt her head out of the way as they like shoot at her or something. Anyway, she just looks pretty dope, and I like that.
I really did like when she met that second boss. and she just like stares at it and then shoots it in the mouth.
Yeah.
They use the rule of cool.
There we go. Yep.
On her a lot. Well, Marcus, guess what? We get to share our star piece this week, because what I had written down was Samus's animations.
Oh, hey!
But I will add, in addition to the really cool parry animations in boss scenes and when she fights the Emmy and stuff, I also really liked some of the details they had when she's just out and about and moving. When she goes up to a hole that she can't fit into, or up against a wall, she'll put her hand on the wall to like steady herself, and she can still aim while she's doing that. And then also when she's like in the water, she kind of leans forward to try and move, even though she's moving slower. I'm a sucker for little detailed character animations like that. So
yeah.
Well, it's okay that we shared our star piece because we have a few other star pieces that were submitted to us today. So I will read those. First one is Andy, who said, I love the cutscene transitions. Those are insane. I think what they're saying is cutscenes start immediately once you enter a room. There's no loading screen or anything. And also, like, after you do a really cool QuickTime event, you go seamlessly right back into the gameplay. So I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
And then we also have one more from Gamer Hushu, who shared a quick jab earlier. And they said, breaking the tradition, the Morph Ball is not an early power-up in Dread. I'm midway through the second area and I still have yet to encounter the Morph Ball. It definitely feels like a stylistic choice as the game repeatedly uses your lack of Morph Ball to guide you through the early areas. And we kind of mentioned that earlier, how the game kind of guides you before opening up more. And he's right. As someone who's played the other games, the Morph Ball is usually almost always the very first thing you acquire in the game. So it is kind of cool that they're saving it for later and getting you used to some of the other systems in the game first. I think that actually works really well because it feels pretty liberating to be able to get through all those tight little gaps that you couldn't until then. Cool. Well, thank you very much for submitting that, Andy and Gamer Hushu. And just a reminder, we will be talking about Metroid Dread next week as well. So for anyone who wants to share a star piece or a quick jab with us, you can reach us at levelwithuspodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on the YouTube version of our show. All right, let's get into the Reaper review. This is the quiz section of our podcast, where Marcus and I try and stump each other, and I have to start with an apology.
Oh boy.
Marcus, last time I totally goofed.
Oh, that kind of I thought you were gonna apologize that your question was gonna be like really rude and tough this time.
No, I'll never apologize for making the question too difficult. But last week we talked about Toem, and I told you to spell Homelandia, but it turns out the area in the game is actually Homelanda, not Londia. So minus half point for me this week, I guess.
So I spelled the word you made up, but it wasn't from the game.
You still got it correct, but I just feel bad for getting that wrong.
Apology accepted. Cool. Wait, do I start this week?
If you want to.
Okay. I feel like for a lot of games, the main question really is just name this or spell this. So, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. What does Emmy stand for?
Marcus, actually? That's the one I chose for you.
I knew it. I knew it. It was easy pickings. It's easy pickings. I had this strong impression, like, that is like the one thing that Jared...
You knew I'd make you do it. Well, the thing is, I knew you were coming into this not knowing much about Metroid. So I'm like, well, here's a little detail of just this game, but I'll answer it anyway. Extraplanetary multiform mobile identifier. And yes, I did have to read my notes to answer that.
So I protected myself from it.
I guess so. Well, here's an easier one. How many Emmys are in this game?
7?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that was a pretty bad backup question. But that being said, I actually have a question for the listeners this week. And Marcus, I won't ask you this because it'd be unfair because you haven't played the other games. But next week, I will give the answer to this question, and whoever got it right will get a special shout-out. It's like a normal shout-out, but special for getting this right. So, listeners, here is your question. Which of the following is not a power-up in Metroid Zero Mission for the GBA? The Charge Beam, the Plasma Beam, the Spazer Beam, the Ice Beam, the Wave Beam, or the Long Beam?
How dare you?
And you're on the honor system here. I'm going to trust you're not going to just look it up on the internet. I want you to actually guess at this and rely on your memory.
I want to apologize on behalf of Jared. for asking that question.
Well, if you're a true, I will say, if you're a true Metroid fan, this question is easy. No, I'm kidding. It's time to move on to rabbit holes. Rabbit Holes is the part of the show where we get to talk about whatever we want to talk about, and usually it's an opportunity to break away from our current discussion and talk about something else that we've been interested in or we found on the internet recently. But this week, I'm actually going to talk about something Metroid related, just because I want to.
Because you can.
Marcus, I assume you have not heard of the pen and paper Metroid game that Nintendo commissioned to be made.
No, is this like a D&D type pen and paper game?
Kinda.
Like a role-playing game?
It does involve dice rolls.
Ooh.
Yeah, let me tell you about it. It's called Metroid Zebezian. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Metroid Zebezian Incursion, and it's Volume 5 of the Famicom Adventure Gamebook series that was published from 1986 to 1991, only in Japan. And basically, it's a pen and paper Metroid game. So you draw out a map, and each room you explore, the book will tell you what happens. And so you fight enemies by doing a die roll, and you get power-ups as you explore, which open up other areas of the map. And like I said, it only came out in Japan, but it was translated by a fan and put into Twine, and they call it Twinetroid. And the person who translated it added some little improvements, like you don't have to actually roll the dice. It'll keep track of your health for you, and it'll even show you a very basic map, so you don't have to write it down. But I did try it for a little while, and I do have some handwritten notes that I made of where certain things were, and I have to say, I'm very impressed. It's just like a Metroid game, where you get a power-up and you feel way more empowered to fight enemies and to get through, like, oh, I remember there was a hidden door, there was a rock slide on the east side of this room back here that I wrote down. I'll go back there and I'll use the bombs that I just got to open it up. And it feels really good. It's based on the first Metroid game, the story is. It's non-canonical, it's a little different, they do some different things. I assume this is something that you would find very interesting, right?
I really hope you send it to me, yeah, please.
I'm going to include a link to Twinetroid in the description, as well as a video from Did You Know Gaming that kind of explains what it is better than I did. And it's also how I found out about the game. So, yeah, I recommend checking it out.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing. For my rabbit hole, I was going to mention a book that I just finished reading, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which is a book that was recommended to me by a few different friends, and also on a video game podcast, besides ours, The Besties. They mentioned it being slightly video gamey, and it kind of is. What it is a murder mystery book, but it's a time loop, body-hopping murder mystery book, where the main character experiences the same day through different people's bodies or perspectives. And if you like murder mysteries, especially like Agatha Christie type, try to figure it out as you go along, it's a great book. I really liked it. Any questions?
Do you move through the story in a non-linear way, or is it just all in the story itself?
I mean, it's a book. It's not like a choose-your-own-adventure book. Yeah, so like calling it video gamey is more in terms of like story rather than like interactivity. It's still a book. But as far as linearity goes, there is a little bit of interesting stuff. It's not just like the day resets. There's also this interesting thing where when the character falls asleep, he'll hop back into an earlier body and stuff like that. So anyway, there's a lot of complexities for it. It's kind of a puzzle book. Like, it's hard to pick up exactly what's happening at some parts, but it's really satisfying.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to convert this podcast into a book club podcast if needed. So maybe I will actually follow your recommendation and read it, and then make that my rabbit hole next time.
If you do read it, let me know, because I actually recommended it to a friend who reads really fast. So yesterday night he texted me and put, "OMG, the ending stuck the landing." So
that does sound like something I would enjoy. So I will do that. Well, that'll wrap it up for this week. But Marcus, I believe you have a little promotion you'd like to make before we close things out.
Yes. Dear listeners, you know us. we're too classy to beg, get down on our hands and knees and ask you to like, subscribe, review, and share with your friends. But I come to you now as a humbled man. From the depths of my heart, I would like to invite you to review our show. And I won't grovel, but I will offer a very special prize. One might say the best thing that I can give, which is to give something out of my creative, ever-loving heart, which is to write a song with your name in it.
Ooh.
Anyway, long story short, if you guys want to review the show, then I'm gonna just play a little ditty, maybe on ukulele or something, about you and how great you are. That's the offer.
Thank you, Marcus. For those interested, I believe Apple Podcasts is the best place you could leave a review and a rating. Until then, thank you everyone for listening. We've really enjoyed doing this show with you. So, with that, I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
And we'll level with you next week. Thank you for leveling with us. The excellent remixes of Metroid music you heard in this episode can be found on ocremix.org, and links to each one of them are listed in the description. All other original music was composed by Marcus. Thanks, Marcus.
Was it a yeah or a meh? How was it?
It's a oh yeah. It's a booyah.
I like the booyah. Can we clip the booyah and use it as a sound effect?
Booyah.
Yes. Here's a question. What colors are the Emmys and which kitchen appliances would they blend with best?
So, with that, I'm Jared.
He's Jared. And I'm Marcus.